Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Nice to meet you, Robin.
From the Arcadian Court in downtown Toronto, welcome to the Empire Club of Canada. For those of you just joining us through either our webcast or our podcast, welcome to the meeting. Before our distinguished speaker is introduced today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our head table guests. I would ask each guest to rise and be recognized and be seated, and I'd ask the audience to refrain from applause until everyone's been introduced. And I suppose good luck with that. Mr. Patrick Brown, leader of the Ontario PC Party, of course. Ms. Jane McKenna, Ontario PC candidate for Burlington. Mr. James Dodd, Vice President, TD Bank Group. Mr. Noble Chamar, partner, Castlesbrock and Blackwell LLP, and a past president of the Empire Club of Canada. Ms. Georgina Blanes, Executive Director, Private Capital Markets Association of Canada, and a director of the Empire Club of Canada. Mr. Peter Bethlen-Falvey, Chief Investment Officer, CST Consultants, Inc. Ms. M.J. Perry, PhD, Student Theology, Vice President and owner of Mr. Discount Limited and a director of the Empire Club of Canada. Ms. Lisa Thompson, MPP, Huron-Bruce, critic for Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, critic for International Trade, member, Standing Committee on General Government. Mr. Ken Emerson, Associate Vice President, Municipal and Stakeholder Relations at Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and First Vice President, Empire Club of Canada. Ms. Sue Vanderbent, Chief Executive Officer, Home Care Ontario, Director, Empire Club of Canada. And Ms. Adrienne Batra, Editor-in-Chief, Toronto Sun. And my name is Barbara Jessen. I'm the President of Jessen & Company Communications and the President of the Empire Club of Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, your head table guests. At the Empire Club of Canada, we are particularly proud of our involvement in the Canadian political process. For well over a century, we have provided a forum for political debate across the spectrum of views and party affiliations. In fact, from time to time, I'm asked what the Empire Club is all about. When the club was established in 1903, the country was embroiled in debate about whether Canada should affiliate itself with the United States. Our founders believed fervently that we should maintain our connections to the British Empire and remain independent from our American neighbors. And what a debt of gratitude we owe them today. This heritage of civic engagement is a deep part of our tradition at the Empire Club. And so it is with particular pride that we're hosting this Leaders Series as we enter the next provincial election debate. Please welcome to the stage Peter Bethlen-Falvey, to MPP candidate for the riding of Pickering-Uxbridge, to introduce Patrick Brown.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. What a great turnout, and I think I know why. As was just mentioned, my name is Peter Bethlen-Falvey, and I'm honored to be running as the nominated candidate, PC candidate for Pickering-Uxbridge. And I'm excited to have an opportunity to give back to my community and our province. Life in Canada has been really good for my family. My parents fled war-torn Hungary in the 1940s. They came here with no money, just themselves and their determination to work hard and build a new life here. With their work ethic to guide me, I've raised, along with my wife, 3 great children and have had a successful financial career. But my decision to run was easy because I believe strongly in the leadership of Patrick Brown as the man who can turn this province around. Sadly, under the Liberal government, Ontario continues to fall behind. People are working harder and getting less. Life for many in Ontario is becoming unaffordable. This simply cannot continue. We must turn it around. That's why people are demanding change. And just a few days ago, the people of Ontario got a glimpse of what change looks like. It's called the People's Guarantee. This is Patrick Brown's plan for a government that will work for you. The People's Guarantee aspires to make Ontario a better place for everyone. And in just a few moments, along with Editor-in-Chief of the Toronto Sun, Adrian Batra, you're going to hear from Patrick Brown and his specific measures to deliver real change. This pragmatic plan will work because it is the result of Patrick Brown's extensive consultations with people across Ontario. Unlike a lot of politicians, Patrick listens. He reaches out to people, a lot of people. In fact, no one works harder than Patrick Brown. He's building an inclusive party where it doesn't matter who you love, where you worship, where you work, and your background. And he has a vision that will work for families across our great province. So it is a great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, that I welcome the leader of the Progressive Party, Conservative Party, and the next Premier of Ontario, Patrick Brown.
Well, thank you, Peter, for that kind introduction. It's great to be here today, and I should note I'll be joined shortly by Editor-in-Chief of the Toronto Sun, Adrian Batra. I should mention, Peter has quite a history that before he became a progressive conservative candidate, he co-ran DBRS, the credit rating agency that actually downgraded Ontario's credit in 2009. So he foresaw the financial challenges Ontario was going to face under the Liberal government, and now he's actually getting so engaged to get Ontario back on track that he's door knocking and committed to public service. So Peter, great to have you with us here today. A lot has changed since I was last year at the Empire Club. We launched our policy platform, our plan to get Ontario back on track, the People's Guarantee, and it was after extensive consultation. It wasn't a few people meeting at Queen's Park in the bubble of Queen's Park putting together a platform. We went to every corner of the province, and we listened. I had a supporter once tell me, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, listen more than you talk, and that's what we did. We literally went to every corner of the province and listened to the best ideas. And we took those ideas to our party membership, and they collectively had a say. It was their voice that became the bedrock of our platform, and that's what I'm excited to talk about today. And any other questions Adrian throws at me. But the 5 cornerstones of our People's Guarantee are first of all, a 22.5% tax cut for the middle class, because after all, you deserve a raise. The people of Ontario deserve a raise. There's an affordability crisis. Middle-class wages have stagnated for 15 years. If you live in Ontario, you're now poorer than the average Canadian when it comes to median income, and that's never been the case before. Our second commitment is a 75% refund on childcare expenses, up to 75%. And right here in the city of Toronto, the cost of childcare is on average $20,000. So not only are we going to build 100,000 new childcare spaces, we're going to help families actually afford it. Because if you can find a childcare space and not afford it, it's meaningless. And I've heard too many stories traveling around the province where childcare is such a sacrifice, such a sacrifice on families being able to afford it. And we want to make it easier for families to be able to afford childcare. Our third commitment is on hydro. Surprise, surprise. There's not a corner of the province we went to they didn't talk about hydro. I think it's well known we have among the highest hydro rates in North America, and they have tripled on the watch of this Liberal government. And so part of our plan to rein in this hydro mess is a commitment to reduce hydro rates on average by 12% for every family and small business in the province of Ontario and give them some much-needed lasting relief, not temporary relief like they're getting right now where the government borrows. Our plan is lasting savings that go beyond an election cycle. Our fourth commitment, and probably the one that I'm most excited about, is closing the gap in healthcare. The dirty little secret in Ontario's healthcare system is that we do a very poor job when it comes to offering treatment for mental health, honoring the courage of those who come forward by making sure they can get that help. In our policy platform, we're making the largest investment in mental health in Canadian provincial history, $1.9 billion over 10 years. And the reason I was so excited about this part of our platform is I know we all love our healthcare system. And I spoke at our party convention what it meant to me. You know, my late grandmother, maternal grandmother, was a volunteer at RVH, our local hospital, for 45 years. She was a blue coat. And I have at my desk behind, my desk at Queen's Park, her volunteer certificate as a reminder of what healthcare means to every community. You can have everything in life, but if you don't have reliable healthcare, you know, there's a big challenge. And when I looked at our healthcare system, when I went around the province, the stories I heard on mental health were just horrifying. You know, if you're a young person needing public counseling, if you have the courage to come forward and say, I need help, it's 18 months, the wait time for public counseling. I met with families who have told me during the wait period, they've had loved ones take their own lives. You know, you break your leg, you go to the hospital, they take care of you, but you're abandoned. You're abandoned in this province when it comes to having the courage to confront the disorder of the brain, and that's not right. That's not the healthcare system that this province deserves, and that's not the healthcare system that I'm going to accept. You know, former Premier Bill Davis, when he was Premier of Ontario, 11% of our health budget was spent on mental health. And despite all the talk, all the rhetoric, you know, every year during Bell Let's Talk Month, you see every member of the Liberal cabinet tweeting, you know, have the courage to come forward. Despite all the rhetoric, we now spend 6% of our healthcare budget on mental health. It's a giant gap. It's the dirty little secret in healthcare, and our platform is going to address that. $1.9 billion over 10 years to make sure that we can have a comprehensive mental health system in the province of Ontario. Our fifth commitment is to bring forward the first ever Trust, Integrity, and Accountability Act. And we definitely need those guidelines at Queen's Park. There are so many loopholes, fundraising loopholes, lobbying loopholes, that the current government has allowed a truck to be driven through on a regular basis. And we're going to close those loopholes. We think it's important to have those strict standards in our provincial legislature. And there's so many examples. You've heard the stories of cash for access, but they've still left those doors open. A minister can still call someone doing business with the government of Ontario asking them for a donation. I want ministers running their departments not focused on fundraising. Ministers all had fundraising targets that, you know, is a distraction from their responsibility to the public, responsibility to the people of Ontario. And on lobbying, some of the stories are just beyond salacious. They're good for Toronto Sun front pages, I'm sure Adrian would agree, but they're not good for the people of Ontario. You know, there was the example of Tesla, where the chief of staff to the Minister of the Environment is working on a policy change where those buying luxury cars get a $14,000 grant. Now, if you're buying a $100,000 Tesla, you probably don't need a $14,000 grant. Now, that chief of staff then goes shortly thereafter and works for Tesla. It's a revolving door, and I want to make sure there is an adequate cooling off period so those ethical abuses can't continue, and that's why I put our Trust, Integrity, and Accountability Act in our 5 cornerstone guarantees. And the reason I say 5 guarantees is I know so many people when they hear about promises from politicians and you're skeptical. Everyone remembers Dalton McGuinty saying that he was going to not raise taxes, then what happens? He raises taxes. Everyone remembers Kathleen Wynne saying she was going to slash auto insurance rates, and it doesn't happen. So I get the public is skeptical, and that's why we wanted to go beyond mere words. And I signed a commitment in front of our party faithful at our party convention, in front of the Queen's Park media, I signed a declaration, a contract with the people of Ontario, that if we don't get this done for you in our first mandate, that I'm not seeking a second. I'm going to resign. We're all in to get this done for the people of Ontario because we have to get our province back on track. And after the policy convention, we took a bus around the province of Ontario from Sudbury to Burlington, from Windsor to Ottawa, to talk about our plan to create prosperity again in the province of Ontario. And I have to say, it is heartening to see the response across the province. People are thirsty for change. And we're seeing that at events across the province. And the candidates that are coming forward, we've had some fantastic, fabulous candidates putting their names forward for public service. And everyone heard in the summer about Caroline Rooney, who I think is just going to make a phenomenal public servant here in Ontario. And you've already met Peter. We got Rod Phillips here today as well. You know, Rod's going to be a star for the province of Ontario. And just recently, announcing that he's going to run for a nomination in Don Valley is Toronto's Deputy Mayor Denzil Minnan-Wong, who's also here today. And I think when you see those type of candidates of that caliber, it speaks to the momentum for change and how people expect and want a better government, a government that's about the people, not the insiders. You know, it's been interesting to watch the Liberal government's attack of our policy platform. And we expected they would attack the policy platform. It's what they do as they hope to cling to office. But their principal attack was Patrick Brown wants to run these value for money audits to root out government waste. Kathleen Wynne said there's no waste in government. Even I found that, I've heard many things come from the Liberal government. I found that to be a bit more than a stretch. Now, we know that there's been scandal after scandal, $8 billion in e-health, nothing to show for it. Almost $2 billion now in gas plants gone. You look at the Ontario, the Northern Telecommunication System, they paid more for consultants than they did, they paid consultants to sell that government asset and paid the consultants more than they actually sold the asset for. You know, there was the 403. They repaved the 403 every 2 years instead of every 15 years. There is waste. And I think last week the Auditor General confirmed it again. The Auditor General reported that in a review of just 14 program areas, amongst hundreds. She reviewed just 14, and in those 14 areas, she found over $1 billion in waste. Yet Kathleen Wynne still says there's no waste. A few examples of the waste the Auditor General identified: power executives expensing items like raccoon traps and scuba gear. Need I say more that there's opportunities to spend your taxpayer dollars more appropriately? I know Ontario has the capacity to be the economic engine of Canada, but you need a government that's focused on you. Not insiders, not people that benefit from government. You need a government that's focused on making Ontario that prosperous province, that job-creating engine we know we can be. And that's what we're focused on. That's what I want to work on day in and day out, 7 a.m. to midnight, to make sure that when people think of Ontario, it's the province that you want to build a business. It's the province that you want to raise a family. And I am incredibly excited about that task for our province, and I'm looking forward to the questions I'm going to have with Adrian on our fireside chat without a fire. So on that note, I welcome Adrian Batra. Yeah. I know. Adrian said it's odd being introduced by you.
Yeah, it is odd. Well, thank you, Patrick, and thank you for your comments. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us and being patient. We know we're a little bit over time here, so we're going to have a very candid and I hope forthcoming chat. I do have some tough questions, even though this is a very friendly crowd for you. Are all the buns off the table is what I want to know before someone starts hurling things at me. 6 months to the election, and this is what you put out. Everybody's seen it. Very fancy. Looks like a magazine. Why 6 months before the campaign?
Well, first of all, we wanted to do our due diligence. We wanted to get out there and do our homework and go to every corner of the province and listen to the best ideas from stakeholders, community leaders, party members to form the basis of our plan. So we did take our time, despite taunts at Queen's Park saying, "Where's your platform? Where's your platform?" We wanted to do it properly. We wanted to take the time under the auspices. There's no monopoly on a good idea. Now that we have 6 months, we've got 6 months to take it to every corner of the province. That same plan that we developed, I want to get to every single riding in the province of Ontario and tell them about our plan to make sure that Ontario's back on track. And this is one giant province, and it's going to take that amount of time to get to every corner.
Okay, I want to talk about something that's actually just sort of coming out and trickling out today. The Financial Accountability Officer of Ontario has now confirmed the Auditor General's concern about the Liberals actually using the pension funds to balance the books, ostensibly saying we have $4 billion less than the Liberals have said. That would change the numbers that you have used in your platform. So I'm wondering how it is that you plan on balancing the books without really actually seeing them.
Well, the Auditor General did say for policy platforms, you got to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and we did use the government's numbers. I do hope that we can work with the auditor to have agreement on reporting standards. What I would say is we've been very conservative in our financial estimates. Let me give you a few examples. We've actually booked a deficit in year one. And normally, when a government gets elected, they say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe it was this bad." Well, I'm predicting it's bad. I know it's not great, and we've actually kept $1.5 billion in our financial forecast for ongoing Liberal agreements that we're going to have to wear some of their mismanagement into our term in office. And so we've actually predicted that, but in year 2, 3, and 4, we're going to pay down over $1 billion in debt, and that is desperately needed. I would note Kathleen Wynne has not paid down a single cent in debt, and unfortunately, it's made us the most indebted subnational government in the world. But we're going to clean that mess up. And I would note, not only have we taken conservative estimates on the costing, we haven't even booked any of the revenue that we know will come from some of the changes. We know that cutting small business taxes, cutting red tape is going to create jobs. That will create revenue. We're not even banking on that. We know selling air rights on subways will create revenue for transit, and we're not banking on any of that. And so we've taken very conservative estimates, and it's one of the reasons I think you hear names like Kevin Page and Kevin Milligan who have actually said the numbers are reasonable, they add up, and it's fully costed.
Okay, I want to ask you about something that you talk very passionately about and you discuss pretty much in every corner of the province, and you just mentioned it in your speech, and that has to do with the unaffordability of hydro. We're now hearing from seniors all across this province who are deciding whether or not they're going to pay their hydro bill or buy groceries. It's the Liberals have really messed up the entire system. But a few months ago, they came up with another scheme where they're going to borrow $25 billion and put that burden on future generations with the so-called Fair Hydro Plan. At the time, you said that that was the wrong thing to do, and your party and many of your members of parliament or members of provincial parliament are here. You voted against it. However, you've now not only said you're going to do the 25%, you're going to do an additional 12%. What is the difference between what they did and what you're doing? Because now you're tripling down on it.
So in their unfair hydro plan, they borrow money, and they borrow a lot of money. And it could be as much as $93 billion to get $21 billion back, temporarily. It's about borrowing a lot of money into the future so they can all of a sudden offer relief right before an election. But borrowing is not structural change. Borrowing is temporary. It's a ploy. It's a ploy by a desperate government. Our plan isn't about borrowing. It's about changes. Let me give you an example. And by the way, the damage of that will be done by the time the election comes. It will be too costly to unravel, and they will have given out much of that relief. But
it's almost like they planned that.
Yeah, well, surprise, surprise. It seems to be the tactic the Liberals use every election. What we're doing is different. Structural changes. We're returning the Hydro One dividend, which is the people's money after all, to the people of Ontario. We're shifting the conservation funding off the hydro bill because it's social policy. But more significantly, we're going to look at these bad contracts and enforce them to the letter of the law. We're also going to stop ones that are at the pre-construction stage. Because despite borrowing all this money to pay for their bad contracts, they keep on signing them. They just proceeded this fall with Fit 5, 390 more contracts for energy we don't need. So just to put this into context, since 2009, we've given away $6 billion in surplus electricity. We wasted enough water power last year, we could have powered 500,000 homes. And the Liberals like to say you're paying more for electricity because of their green energy policy. It has nothing to do with green energy. If it was about green energy, we wouldn't be wasting our own water power. They signed expensive, bad contracts that benefited Liberal insiders and donors, not the people of Ontario. And just to put this in complete context, the Auditor General said we overpaid by $9.2 billion on what the market was paying for green energy. And the 30 companies that got many of these big contracts, the 30 big companies, they donated $1.3 million to the Ontario Liberal Party. These are bad deals. This is a mess that Kathleen Wynne made, and we're going to do everything we can to clean it up.
Mark? Yeah. Popular answer with the crowd. Margaret Thatcher once famously said, "Good Conservatives always pay their bills, unlike socialists who just run up other people's bills." You're planning on running a deficit, as you say, in your first year in office, and then subsequently balancing their budgets. We once heard that from a now very famous Liberal Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who also ran on the fact that they were only going to run a deficit for the first year. We're now 3 years into that mandate and billions of dollars more in debt and deficit. I appreciate the fact that you've signed this guarantee and you've said to Ontarians that if you can't fulfill certain things, you will not run for another term. How is it that you can say that with such confidence, knowing the financial shift is happening all the time with this government? We don't genuinely know where all the money is.
Well, I think we've erred on the side of caution by booking $1.5 billion from the Liberal slush fund to make sure there's not obligations that we're going to have to inherit from their mismanagement, by not booking revenue that we know conservatively will be generated from the changes we're bringing to grow the economy. I think it's prudent to say that we are going to accept that we'll carry on the mismanagement in year one, because it'll take time to exit some of these programs. But in year 2, 3, and 4, we're actually going to be paying down the debt. And I agree, it should be a conservative principle to pay your bills. And with a progressive conservative government, Ontario will start doing that. And I don't want someone in our caucus like Peter Bethlenfalvy to downgrade us. So we'll make sure we pay our bill.
Yeah, well, we got someone that we can trust making sure that everything happens. Let's talk a little bit about the middle income tax cut. Why just target the one rate and not just bring them all down by dealing with the basic personal exemption?
Well, everyone is going to have tax relief under our plan. For families with an income of $100,000 and less, it'll be on average a 25% reduction. Between $100,000 and $200,000, it's going to be 20%, and over $200,000, 7%. We're helping the middle class in a pretty significant fashion. This is broad-based tax relief that helps everyone, and not just families. We're going to cut small business taxes by 28.5%. This is real tax relief for a province where families are struggling with an affordability crisis and businesses are feeling pummeled.
You've mentioned a number of your candidates, some of which whom are here, and more to come, we can assume, because one of the things that people will look at in their next Premier of Ontario is what sort of men and women that they are surrounding themselves by. So tell us a little bit give us a little sneak peek of what we can expect over the course of the next couple of months.
Well, there's actually a beautiful story happening within the Progressive Conservative Party. 3 years ago, we had 12,000 party members, and in a lot of ridings, nominations would go acclaimed. We've gone from 12,000 party members to 180,000 as of today. We are disproportionately young, disproportionately diverse, and we actually now have more women candidates than at any point in our party's history. And there really is some phenomenal candidates. You know, I mentioned a few earlier, but I look at Anjali Passis in Mississauga Centre. She speaks 5 languages. a lawyer of Filipino heritage. We've never had a Filipino-Canadian MPP. What a role model she will be for young women in Mississauga. You know, I think of Troy Crowder in Sudbury. Now, Troy played in the NHL for the New Jersey Devils. Proud family from Sudbury. His mom actually runs the Santa Claus Parade every year. She's probably his biggest secret weapon there. But you know, he's a proud Northerner and is excited about running for the Progressive Conservatives. I look at Greg Rickford, former Minister of Natural Resources, running in Kenora. We've got some phenomenal candidates, and I think as we get closer to the election, you're going to learn about more of them.
There is a lot here. It's a very meaty document. But one thing, as a fiscal conservative, as I am, I always am very leery when the Toronto Star is telling me that I should take a look at this document. So, you know, we usually run the other way in my newsroom when it says that the Toronto Star is saying something that's a good thing. So how do you take the criticism, and there is much of it out there from certain corners of your own party, that this could have been written by a Liberal, could have been written by Justin Trudeau, could have been written by Kathleen Wynne? How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, let me say I enjoyed the praise from the Toronto Sun about our policy platform and the front page. When my mother called me, my mother's here today to tell me we had a positive editorial in the Toronto Star, at first I thought, are pigs flying? But it's a good document, and the fact that it gets praise from both the Toronto Sun and the Toronto Star is a wonderful thing. I'm sure there'll be a few negative articles in the days ahead from the Toronto Star. You can expect that. How can you know, we actually listened. We did our homework, identifying the serious gaps in mental health or the unaffordability in childcare. How can you criticize that? The fact that middle-class families deserve tax relief, or that we deserve a Trust, Integrity, and Accountability Act at Queen's Park, or hydro relief, I think these are pretty basic concepts that deserve widespread support. And so when the Toronto Star is saying it, or the Toronto Sun, I think it speaks to the fact we did our homework.
Stick with the Sun. Yeah. It's better. One of the biggest things that Ontarians also talk about, because we are in, you know, the heart of Toronto, and you know we're just missing the TFC parade, which, by the way, yay TFC. We should have worn our scarves. Transit is a significant problem, and Metrolinx has been arguably one of the biggest white elephants that the Liberals have created. They have had significant challenges with doing the regional modeling and et cetera. We had the crosstown going through, and who knows when we'll see that come to fruition. You have committed to doing something quite significant. That number of municipal politicians, and I see a few of them here who both happen to be deputy mayors, and one's the budget chief over there, uploading the TTC operational costs. That's an idea that the NDP has been talking about for quite some time. What's the rationale behind doing that? Well,
Toronto's a world-class city, but we don't have world-class transit. You go to any other major city, you see effective transit systems, and you're in Toronto, and try going on the DVP at 4 o'clock. Try coming on the Gardiner in the morning. It's horrific. We have to invest in transit. It's about not only moving people, but when you have roads that are suffocated by congestion, it's difficult to get product to marketplace. And we had that real challenge in the city of Toronto. And so our commitments are pretty significant. We can amortize the cost over a longer period. We can build subways in a fashion that Toronto wouldn't be able to without this partnership. And so we're making a pretty significant commitment on infrastructure, not just in the city of Toronto, but across the province. You look at the Ring of Fire. We've made a commitment to actually get that done, to untap that $60 billion potential in Northern Ontario. I think part of our ability to get Ontario's economy back on track is to invest in infrastructure.
Let's talk a little bit about politics and the politics of moving into what will be one of the most contentious and change elections coming up in June of 2018. Your opponents, Kathleen Wynne and Andrea Horwath. Andrea is really hammering the Liberals on overcrowding of hospitals. And then Kathleen Wynne has taken on an interesting strategy with one of the lowest approval ratings at nearly 15%. She's decided to travel the province and do town halls. What do you say, if you go into one community after Kathleen Wynne has been there?
It's fully costed. We've got 80 pages, 147 commitments, and I would challenge the NDP and the Liberals to come up with a fully costed plan and put it in writing just like we have.
A few months ago, you and I were on a similar stage in a similar format, and I asked you one parting question. And when you are out there now, unlike all these wonderful people who've paid a lot of money to hear you speak, you're not going to be afforded that opportunity during a campaign. It has to be quick, short, and because you're cramming a lot of information in a very small pinhole. What do you want people to remember about Patrick Brown? What do you stand for?
I want them to know that we're going to get Ontario back on track, that we're going to clean up the mess that Kathleen Wynne has left, and we're going to make Ontario the job-creating engine that we once were. There's no reason that we have to settle for being a have-not province. Right now, we've been a have-not province for 8 years. Newfoundland subsidizes Ontario. Former Premier Mike Harris is here. If you'd asked Mike Harris when he became Premier if Newfoundland would be subsidizing Ontario, he probably would have laughed at you. We don't need to settle to be a have-not province. Ontario can be that job-creating, prosperous province that we have been and we will be in the future.
Seems like a perfect opportunity to wrap it up. Good luck.
Thank you.
And I think there's a lot of people in this room who wish you all the success in the next campaign.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian and Mr. Brown. Here to thank Mr. Brown properly is Ms. Jane McKenna. Welcome you to the podium.
I'd like to thank Bruce Power for letting me have this opportunity to do the closing remarks, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'd also like to recognize the Empire Club's ongoing contribution to public discourse on the vital issues of the day and for organizing this very important leader series of speaking engagements. First of all, I'd like to know if any candidates or MPPs are here. Could you please stand up so we can acknowledge you? I'd like to thank you for every day for your hard work and for your service for all the people of Ontario, so thank you so much for being a part of that today. People always ask me all the time, my connection with Patrick, and shortly after I lost the election, I had the privilege of starting to work with Patrick on a day-to-day basis. With Waleed Solomon, James Dodds is here today, and there was a handful of us. And people say to me all the time, what is it about him, about leadership, that you actually see that he's a leader? And I said, well, I'll tell you a couple things. The very first time Patrick and I went out, it was probably a week into him running as a leader, and we went up to Timmins. And there was 5 people that came out to the meeting. And Patrick got 5 memberships signed up, and I got out, and I was like, Patrick said to me, Jane, keep your eye on the ball. It's 5 more memberships than we had 5 minutes ago. So then the next thing is Kathleen comes out to say that you cannot no longer get corporate dollars. So Patrick goes out, he raises $16.1 million, Kathleen raised $6 million, and Andrea, I think, was a little under $2 million. So then the next challenge is we've got 12,000 memberships. We usually run, I think, even when a nomination, we have about 20,000. And this man has brought 182,000 memberships into this party. Now, I think his goal is 200,000 before the election. Is that correct? Am I saying that? And I just want to say something else. You're only as good as the people that are around you, and it's all of us pushing from behind to get where we need to go, and we need everybody to do what we need to do to get to this election to win. Patrick is a leader. He is committed. He's every day of my life being part of that process. People know how passionate I am about him. But he's bringing hope back to the people of Ontario. And if nothing else, we deserve to have hope to make this province great again. So I am very grateful for every opportunity that I have with this man and the people that are surrounded around him. I mean, his mother's back there, Mrs. Brown, who was an unbelievable when we were doing the leadership with his sister Stephanie and Fiona. And you can tell why this young fella is as passionate and compassionate and does what he does because of the lovely family that he does have surrounding him. So I just want to thank everybody today. And everybody enjoy happy holidays and Merry Christmas, and have a great day. Thank you.
I want to express a sincere thank you to our sponsors, Bruce Power and Home Care Ontario, for making this event possible. We pride ourselves at the Empire Club in bringing speakers like this to our podium, but it wouldn't be possible without the generous support of these sponsors, so we're very, very grateful. I also want to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, for webcasting today's event for thousands of viewers around the world. Although our club was founded in 1903, as I mentioned earlier, we are active on Twitter at Empire_Club. You can visit us online at www.empireclub.org, and you can also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And finally, please join us again at our next event, which will take place on Wednesday, December the 14th, and Minister of Energy and Glenn Thibeault will be here to offer some rebuttal to the remarks that were made today. We'll be at the Hilton Hotel, and I urge you to come out and hear what he has to say. Thank you so much for attending today's event. This meeting is now adjourned.